Everyone is talking about how AI is replacing jobs, but what if that's the wrong conversation? Today, I'm joined by Kelly Monahan to unpack why AI is becoming a scapegoat, how leaders are missing the bigger picture, and why the future of work may depend less on technology and more on rebuilding trust, learning, and human connection. Join me as we dig into this very timely and heated topic. All right, welcome back to the Human Capitalist Podcast. I am your host, Trent Cotton, and I am joined by a fellow human capitalist, found her on LinkedIn. I think we commented on each other's content, right, Kelly? And then it just kind of blossomed from there.
100%. It was, on LinkedIn, I think we were very much aligned on a counterpoint that we were both making, and it went from there.
Yeah, we were doing the virtual fist bumps, kind of taking people.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. Well, when we were meeting in real life, well, virtually, you have a really interesting career trajectory that I think is good to kind of have a baseline before we dig into the topic. So
Sure.
why don't you share that?
Yes. So, I'm going to take you all the way back. I'm from Rochester, New York. And so during my formative years, Kodak was shedding 45,000 jobs. And so I grew up in this environment where everyone was so fearful of losing
Yeah.
their work because they were.
Mhm.
And so I think that unconsciously led me into HR because I was like, I knew I wanted to do business. I wanted to make money. Wanted obviously to contribute my expertise and thought, okay, HR has got to be where the good stuff happens. Like, how do we get people employed, right? Naive.
Sorry,
So here
I
I
really
am.
tried to contain the laugh, but it just kind
You
of came
can't,
out,
you can't, because I'm like, oh, right, this is we're going to engage employees, develop leaders. And it was during the time of robotic process automation. And so my
Mhm.
first assignment was, you're going to go do a reduction in workforce, a RIF. And I thought, you
Welcome.
have got to be kidding me. I'm like, I'm like repeating what I just saw in Rochester. Like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
But you know what? It was a terrible situation for the people receiving the news, for me delivering the news. It was back in the day when we did this all in person, one person at a
Mm.
time, 12-hour day. And the one thing that, I think still haunts me to this day, but also motivates me is this woman came back to the office the next day because IT forgot to turn off her badge. And she said to me, if you knew this new technology was coming, like, why was this a hidden secret project in the company for the last 6 months? Like, why couldn't you just say something? Like, we're adults. We could have handled it because now I'm going back out into the job market with a skill set that no longer makes sense. And
Mm.
from that point on, I've dedicated my career to understanding how do we get people ready and maintaining employment during times of technology transformation. And I've had the privilege to do this at Deloitte, Accenture, Meta, was actually Facebook's first future of work director and researcher in this space, and then had the privilege to go to Upwork and start their research institute for 4 years. So I've seen it all in big consulting, in big tech, and now I'm on my own. So we can have these kind of conversations, Trent, and say what needs to be said in this moment without a corporate PR filter.
I love it. I love it. And the everyone has a riff horror story. Mine was
Yeah.
shutting down an operations center in
Okay.
St. Louis.
Ooh.
Average tenure was about 20 years.
Oh, that's
And
terrible.
yeah, so when the regional executive, he was local, he picked me up from the airport.
Yeah.
Um, he had two gentlemen with him that I didn't know. I mean, I knew most of the staff, and I didn't know who they were. And he introduced me, and I remember it was Matt and Andy. Well, whenever I
Okay.
shook Andy's hand, I realized that he had a side piece under his coat. And so I'm shaking his hand, and I looked at Bill and
Okay.
I said, Bill, why is he armed? He goes, yeah, well, it kind of somehow got leaked, and there's been some death threats and everything. So we want you to
Oh my
have
God.
security. Yeah. So it was 400 or 500 people. So we made like a general announcement, and then I
Yep.
met department by department. I mean, it was grueling. I had a chair thrown at
Yeah.
me. Um,
Oh,
I had someone come across the desk, and I'm like, "Look,
yep.
don't let this suit fool you. I grew up in the country and went to school in the ghetto. Like, if you're coming for me, you better be ready to go." But luckily, Matt and Andy got them. But it was kind of cool because I was single at the time. I was in
Yeah.
between marriages. And so we went out
Okay.
that night because I still had to have security. And so I went to like one
Okay.
of my favorite places and I looked like this VIP. It was the only time in my life I ever looked like a VIP. But
Oh
yeah,
my God. I love
very,
it.
very aligned. And it's
Yes.
funny, you were talking about not skilling up the workforce. And
Yeah.
I actually posted something today, and I know
Oh,
you probably get this as well on LinkedIn. Like
yep.
everyone in the comments is kind of nice. It's the end mails
Yeah.
where they really
Oh,
try to bring the heat, right?
absolutely. Yep.
So I am being pummeled
Oh
because
no.
the whole video, it's a kind of a clip where I
Okay.
basically say if you are releasing unskilled workers that you have had for longer than 4 or 5 years, you've had every opportunity and obligation to reskill
Yep.
them, if not for your organization, back into society. I'm sorry,
Yep.
you're committing malpractice. And the
Yeah. Oh,
malpractice word is what's triggering all these little HR people.
really? I
Oh,
feel
yeah.
like
They're
the
like,
Gen Zers would be clocking it in the background with that
oh,
post.
oh,
I'm like,
absolutely.
right? Like they're clocking it and
Absolutely.
it's I mean, HR is so sensitive, Trent. Like we've got to get over
Oh,
ourselves a bit.
yeah, yeah, that's why, yeah, I didn't fit in.
Yeah.
Didn't fit in. I'm like, because my whole thing is, I love how you positioned it, like, why you got into the field that you
Right.
got into is you became obsessed with how do we fix this problem?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just an HR problem, it becomes a societal problem because then we have all these
Absolutely.
people that are not skilled for work anyway,
Yeah.
soapbox there.
Yeah.
Um,
Plus one.
but I know I know that you and I talked about kind of the noise of AI in
Yeah.
the market
Yeah. Yeah.
and the decisions around it. So, what's the one trend that you are most intrigued and concerned by?
Yeah. So it was so fascinating. 2 years ago, I had this opportunity to do this research. We were trying to study what high performing AI users were doing. So think about the top 25% of AI users within a company who's actually driving productivity.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, what I found is 67% of those high performing AI users would actually rather work with AI than their human colleagues. Another 64% actually trust AI more than their human colleagues. So, what I'm most fascinated about right now is how do we incorporate this new technology in a way that doesn't further disconnect us from our
Right.
human beings? At the end of the day, we are still social beings. And I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of friends and family use AI as if it's their bestie. One of my friends calls it
Yeah.
their boyfriend. And I'm like, guys, like, time out. Like, the unintended
Oh man.
consequences of this is going
Yeah.
to be, I personally think, to your point, not just organizational, but from a societal perspective. Again, I'm coming from Facebook. Like, can we not learn what happened with social media? There was good and bad, right? With any
Right.
sort of technology revolution. How do we make sure with AI we're learning from our past 10, 15 years of this great social technology experiment and actually use AI in a way that does not make us or I should say, less trustworthy and more
Mhm.
disconnected from our human colleagues?
I love that, and I saw. I wish I could remember who I could give the quote to because it was awesome. It said
Okay.
that the concern that they have is that we are becoming we are seeking dependence on AI rather than augmentation.
Mm. Ooh,
And I was like, God, that's a great, I
that's
mean, just
it.
a very short statement that
Yep.
is very rich. But what do you think is driving this statistic that workers trust AI more than they trust their coworkers? I mean, that's a little
Yeah.
concerning.
It is. So I think we're in a convergence of factors that is not working in our favor right now. So let's not forget, just a few years ago, we were in this thing called the pandemic and
Yeah,
isolated from each other. And no one wants to talk about it anymore. Like we just want to move on and forget about it. But I
right.
think it fundamentally shifted the way that we view each other, both within organizations, but also society. And then you feel on this like massive geopolitical uncertainty, polarization narrative that's out there just in the headlines,
Mhm.
social media, all of that. And so I worry that we are actually starting from a position of mistrust in many ways, coming from the last 5 to 6 years of, let's call it social trauma, of being
Right.
fearful of one another. And AI came at this exact moment in time when I actually think we were ripe for
Mhm.
something else, to go to for comfort. And I think to me, it signals like as a researcher, I'm a social scientist, like we have a human relating problem in our society and
Right.
within our organizations. We have not figured out how to relate to one another. And the
Mhm.
solution is not AI. The solution is actually doubling down on the hard parts about humanity, which is getting into all the gray areas, having tolerance, getting curious about how people are changing around us, becoming even more inclusive than we want. And oh, by the way, let's at the same time also say DEI is no longer in style and actually become this very political issue at the exact same time all this is happening. So to me, I look
Right.
at the data and I'm like, yeah, this kind of checks out. Like, this is terrible. Like, what terrible
Mhm.
timing in many ways.
It's almost like, I grew up in the South, so, like, looking at the
Okay.
hurricane path and going, "Oh, yeah, it's not
Yeah.
surprised that it hit that area." They've
Right.
been tracking the data's been tracking, the little spaghetti
Yes.
models, you know? Do
100%.
you but let me ask, 'cause I do wanna talk a little bit about the pandemic and how it affected
Yeah.
the workforce. Um, I was usually very social, like, I enjoy going
Okay.
out with
Sure.
friends and groups of people. And lately, I have not been that way. I've been like trying to find the source. Like being
Yeah.
around a bunch of people exhausts me now. I can do it for
Mm.
short bits, but I have to come back
Yep.
and I call it my people quota. Once I'm at my people quota, I want to come back home,
Right.
do my research or whatever and recharge. Do you think that maybe the pandemic, like as I guess a survival mechanism that we learned to be by
Mhm.
ourselves because we had no other choice, but now we can't come out of it. And now we're looking at AI for that intimacy, I guess, for the lack of a better
Sure.
word.
Yeah, companionship. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had more data on this to have like a data informed. I would just give you more of my opinion on this. I do. I think, unfortunately, the pandemic did a couple things. One, it exhausted us and it changed our rhythms, I think, more
Hmm.
than anything else. So, even if you think about work, like I work very differently still to this day. Like, finally getting back on a plane, getting back at conferences, giving keynotes. But that world was disrupted for 4 years. And
Right.
so, as I get back out there, to your point, there's this newfound level of exhaustion. And I'm like, God, how was it going into I was going to the office 5 days a week
I
and
know.
going to happy hours afterwards, then
Yes.
going to the gym. Like, I can't even imagine that sort of routine and rhythm. So, I do think it's fundamentally shifted to me that the energy pathway and that routine and rhythms that we all get into. And I think
Hmm.
for some of us, we're probably finding a little bit more of that balance and leaning into some of that introversion. But I do worry, I'm a huge proponent of remote work, distributed work, all of that. But I do think there's unintended consequences in
Hmm.
our, to your point, like energy levels of then reconnecting with people in person.
Yeah, there was a Stanford study that came out not too
Okay.
long ago. Because the whole track around entry level jobs is that AI is taking the entry
Yeah,
level jobs.
that's right.
They actually found that the driving factor was remote work, not
Mm,
necessarily AI, because they kind of tracked the
yep.
number of job postings, and I'm doing this from memory. It's been 3 or 4
Yeah.
weeks since I looked at it, but they were tracking the number of entry level jobs, and they had like this crest of when kind of the mandate to work from home hit, and whenever ChatGPT came on the scene,
Yeah.
and the dip with AI was nothing compared to the dip with remote work, and I found that really, really interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw the Gallup research that just came out this week as well.
Mm-mm.
I think it was 1% of all layoffs were actually attributed to AI. The majority actually are being attributed to macroeconomic uncertainty, cash becoming more expensive on balance sheets, changing customer demand. So I think to your point, AI is being used as a scapegoat. Is being used to explain why there's no entry level jobs, why the job market's terrible, why layoffs are happening. And I think part of that's a little bit of a narrative issue we have with leaders today, where investors love this idea of, oh, we're doing this because we're investing in AI versus there's pick your flavor of the day of what leaders are
Right.
responding to. And I think, that's really interesting to hear about the entry level jobs. It's really hard to onboard someone remotely. I did this research at Meta. It's really hard to get them productive in a remote environment. So I'm not
Yeah.
overly shocked by that.
Well, and kind of just for the audience, no, I did not send the last 2 videos to Kelly and ask her to plug them, but I literally posted something about
Okay.
3 of the AI CEOs, Mark, Dario, and Sam, all
Yep.
walking back this whole job apocalypse because of AI. Um, and there's a bill that's been on the floor since June of
Okay.
last year, the AI Jobs Clarity Act, which
Yeah.
would require companies whenever they're doing layoffs to say almost like a 1-to-1 ratio. We
Sure.
replaced this group of 10 people with this one agent, but it
Yeah.
would also require them to show how many of their employees they have upskilled to a new AI skill,
Mm.
as well as
Oh,
how many
interesting.
new jobs have they created because of AI. Because I mean, the World Economic Forum, I think it says there's going to be like 92 million. It keeps changing as the
Yeah.
technology changes, but 92 million jobs that are going to be created because of AI. But going back to your first point, the real problem is that we don't have a workforce that's ready to assume whatever those new roles are. Like, how do we, as practitioners, how do they change the tide there?
Yeah. I think for so it's funny, I'll give you a real life example. When I joined Meta, it was actually amazing, and it was, this mantra was the year of learning, and the
Okay.
whole organization was rewired. It was, when they changed the name to the metaverse, we all thought we were gonna be working in VR. That did not quite
Right.
pan out the way we thought. However, I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time in VR, had a lot of fun. But we so quickly pivoted from the year of learning to then the year of efficiency.
Oh,
And
wow.
that tone and culture shift was immediate. And I'm
Mm,
worried that's what a lot of organizations have done is we have lost the art of learning. Learning should be the job today. I mean, there's all this like great organizational theory back from the 70s and 80s about the learning organization. Peter Senge, like, is the, kind of godfather of all that. We got to
mhm.
pull out some of those books and be like, yeah, the whole purpose of this is to evolve and learn and innovate. We have
Mhm,
become like the last 18 to 24 months hyper focused on cutting cost, optimizing, and efficiency. The mantra I hear across executives for almost every AI adoption is faster, better, cheaper. And I don't
mhm.
know about you, like, that's not gonna get me up on a Monday morning thinking through doing my job even faster and cheaper,
Wow.
like that sort of language, but that's the dominant discourse right now. So the most I think practical thing practitioners can do is we've got to bring back learning as part of the job, as part of our focus, as part of our priority. I've seen most
Mhm.
L&D budgets get cut over the last 18 months. It's one of the very first things to get cut at the very moment. We need this actually operating at scale within organizations.
No, completely right. And it's also kind of ironic that one of the things that you hear about skills, the soft skill that everyone is going to have in order to survive the age of AI is adaptability. Well, in order to be
Right.
adaptable, sometimes you need to be able to learn. And it's almost like
Yeah,
the companies are going, we want you to learn, but learn in your own hours and then bring it back
that's
to
right.
work. And I don't necessarily, I mean, I don't mind it because I'm a nerd. I
Yeah.
love learning new things, but not I mean, I'm in a different stage of my life. My daughter's
Yeah.
23. I have a little bit more free time.
Yep.
If I was still young and had a family and all the
Sure.
different things, I mean, it's kind of hard to go add another 2 hours to your day to go and learn something new to remain relevant in the workforce.
Yeah. What's so interesting? I was just having this conversation with, I'm not gonna name the company, but like a Fortune 100 company. And
Mhm.
I was pushing on them, probably in like a place that was a little uncomfortable, but like why had learning become so deprioritized? And because, like, again, like they want this new workforce, they want these new skills. And yet, to your point, there's no investment. And I'm
Mhm.
like, why are you expecting people to do this on nights and weekends? Like, do you really think after a full 8, 9 hour day, they're going to go open up Coursera and go learn about AI agents? Like, probably
Right.
not. Right. But it was fascinating from a leadership perspective. What they said to me was, Kelly, our tenure is getting so low. We are only able to keep people in their seats for, call it, 2 to 3 years.
Mm.
That sort of investment, I don't want to be the one investing. So then they go and elsewhere. And I'm like, oh God, we're in a chicken and egg situation
Oh
because,
my god, it's such a cop out though.
right? Isn't it? And I'm like,
Oh
okay,
god.
like, so I basically said to them, like, your job, this is my opinion, your responsibility is not to keep people employed for forever. Not the Kodak
Mhm.
model that I grew up in. Your job is though to keep people future proof to a degree as much as they're meeting you halfway on that journey and keeping people
Mhm.
employable and the ability to be employed. A healthy job market will be good for you because those are your customers. That will be advantageous and eventually come back. So I don't know, it's a real struggle right now, and I think that mindset, what I heard from that leader, I think is very prevalent in a lot of big organizations today.
Oh, and has been for a
It
long
has
time.
been. Great point.
But it's funny in the late 90s, I was working for this older senior lender.
Yeah.
And whenever I first started working, he was kind of mentoring, but had like a dotted line, a very strong dotted line into him. And one of my first meetings with him is, how can I prepare you for the next job? And I didn't
Mm,
know how to answer it. I mean, I was in my
right.
early 20s. And I
Sure.
said, Mr. Joe, like, what do you mean? He says, I know that I am renting your time. Now, there's a benefit because you're going to do work to help support me, but I'm renting your time until the next step. What is that next step? So that way I feel good about renting your time and I'm reinvesting back
Hmm.
into you to get you ready for the next role. And it
Yeah.
completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
But it made an imprint because anytime that I had anyone join my team, I kind of asked them the same thing, like, what's next?
Right.
Because I want to make sure that our one-on-ones are not just give me an update on what you're doing, but
Right. Oh
also
God. Yeah.
how can I get you to that next step? I love even on LinkedIn seeing people that I've worked with or mentored and they're getting promoted. I think some of that has been lost. But I do want
Yes.
to talk about the cop out. So the
Okay.
whole thing of I don't want to train them for another
Yeah.
company, I get it. However, you're assuming that if you don't by investing in this person that they're going to want to look elsewhere. I mean, if you're creating that learning culture as you're talking about,
Yep.
that's some glue that actually helps with retention, or does the research show otherwise? Because I'd love to be proved wrong.
Oh, yeah. No, I think you're spot on. I mean, the two things as I think about, I had the opportunity when I was at Deloitte to work a lot with Josh Burson and his team, who did a lot of research into this and the Irresistible organization. And then just more broadly, as I think about great places to work and Gallup and all of those type of
Um,
surveys. I mean, we know the two things that have to be true for someone to stick is a really good leader, manager, and their ability to learn and upskill. Like if you get those two things right, it's going to be really hard to get people to leave your organization. And I
mhm,
think to your point, that's why it's a cop out and it's also flawed logic because
very,
the ability for them to actually have retention is much higher if you actually invest in their learning and development. So again, like these are like back to the basics. This has nothing to do with AI. This has nothing to do with technology. It's
nothing.
about showing up and being a good leader and having good managers and also making sure that they've got learning built into how the organization works.
And I think too something that is lost is understanding where value creation happens at each step of the process.
Yeah.
So, if I am fine tuning that person and giving them some additional skills, exposing them to projects outside of their role because I know that that's what they want to do, that's going to keep them in the company.
Yeah.
One of my longest tenures, I was there 11 years. But every 2 years, I had the same job, but I had a different scope or I was working on a different project. I mean, I'm ever grateful because it got me where I am today. But do you
Yep.
think that companies are just looking at how can I keep this person in this role producing in the most efficient way until I decide to lay them off and call it because of AI? Or am I
Yeah.
just assuming?
Yeah. I mean, I wish that wasn't true, but I think what you just articulated is the reality for many leaders today. And
Oh,
listen, I
good.
know we're being up on leaders, but I feel for them. Like, I'm not sure I would want to be leading a large organization at this point in time. Right
Uh-uh.
now, there is
Nope.
so much working against you, and there is so much
Uh-uh.
pressure from boards and investors. So I think this short term, like I've never seen such short term thinking. Where, as I think again in my past career, when I was running research teams, we used to build out 18 to 24-month roadmaps. In my last role, we were asked to build out 3-month roadmaps because things were changing that quickly. And you
Yeah.
you can't really get much done in a 3-month
Mm,
period that's actually meaningful, that actually changes the needle on something or delivers that value. And I think that's why we're caught in this efficiency optimization game because you can cut costs in 3 months.
mhm.
That's a lot easier to do than create value. And I think the
Yeah.
last thing I'll say and share is, as I talk with leaders and organizations, I think what I get concerned about is they are under a lot of pressure from their board to find cost reduction to pay for AI. And so by 2030, a lot of organizations are under pressure to have quite a bit of workforce reduction in favor of having AI agents. And it drives me nuts, Trent, because like I just responded to this post on LinkedIn the other day of an AI influencer saying, "Oh yeah, I know someone who's managing 1,000 agents." And I'm like, BS. Like, first of all, that is such a waste. I can't even imagine. And like, that's just not true. But like, that's what board members see. Someone with 5 million followers post that, and they're like, great. Who's managing 1,000 agents at my company? And it's like,
Right.
God, we're caught in a loop. We got to get out of this.
It is. You actually touched on something, and I have been preaching this until I'm blue in the face.
Okay.
You just said it's not necessarily AI; it's a redistribution of capital, and that's what's
Correct.
happening. Is rather than investing in the person, can I get AI or automation to do this? Which is fine.
Yes.
But you need to understand where the value of work, because at the end of the day, there are still things that are uniquely human. You can
Yes.
completely overhaul leveraging AI and agents and everything for an operations group, but what about those interpersonal connections that they have to answer questions for other employees? What about their interactions with clients? You can't automate that, right?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating because the media is jumping all over that, AI is wiping out. It's not. It's the
Yeah.
redistribution of capital. That's, to me, it,
Uh,
from the data I'm looking at, that's the only thing that I can look at financially and go, okay, now that makes sense.
100. I love that terminology. And I think too, I think the thing that concerns me is, for the last, let's call it 6, 7 years, I've had the opportunity to actually even manage software engineers. And I think this is what concerns me is if I think of a software engineer job, it is very contained in many ways. Like it is repetition. I mean, obviously you have to have strong domain expertise. So it makes sense for the same people who are building AI of like, oh yeah, well, you can automate, most of the job. Well, yeah, for a
Mhm,
software engineer or coder, that makes sense. Like that math actually to me.
mhm.
But when you start coming out into project management, marketing, sales, operations, there is so much more messy middle that's happening every single day in that job.
Yeah,
And what people are reacting to is not bugs in code. It is actually bugs in how we're relating to one another and conflict.
right.
And like
Communication.
that's communication, all of that
Mhm,
stuff is actually what makes the world go round. And so I think that's where this dominant discourse of AI is displacing jobs, we can see how easily it is. It's very much coming from that like software engineer coder mindset. And I
mhm.
worry we're now trying to apply that throughout other areas of the company and that math is not mathing.
Yeah, I gave an example to a client back in the day, well, prior to my current role. They were looking at automating some interpersonal things, and I just
Okay.
pushed back on them. They're like, "Well, you can write this out and have it sent out, and then if the person needs, if the client needs something, they can call in. But go ahead and get that first one out." I said, "Okay, let's
Yeah.
just go through a simple exercise. Trent, you have been a jerk lately. What is going on?" I said, "You read that.
Yeah.
Now, what if I change the tone and I pick up the phone and go, 'Hey, Trent, you kind of been a jerk lately. What's been going on?'" I said,
Very
"Completely
concerned.
different.
Yes.
Completely different." I said, you can't automate that part, and they still push back because it was a bunch of engineer-minded
Yep.
people, because they're like, and I don't disagree with them. Sometimes I do wish I could outsource my feelings and stuff and
Of
interactions
course.
to AI. It would probably handle it better for me. But I think that, just kind of having those simple reframing conversations, because, just push a button and automate is not the answer.
Right.
But it's interesting. I saw a stat that AI skills is becoming more prevalent in job descriptions, and it was tracking
Mhm.
from like 2022, and then you see this 60-degree angle beginning in
Yeah.
2023. Now, I know that you've been doing a lot of work with your
Yep.
clients about the redesign of work, the future org.
Yep.
And a lot of it has been around skills. Like, what are you seeing from the interaction? What are you seeing from your research? Like, what are some of the trends?
Yeah. There's a couple things. So, especially when I was at Upwork, I had the opportunity to look at the labor market, which is, freelancer platform. And so we were able to
Mhm,
see the direct effects of AI and what AI skills actually meant for a lot of jobs. So, from an AI perspective, I think there's a technical skill set where the domain knowledge is becoming, in some ways, more democratized, right? Where before you need to have SQL knowledge or all these various different, coding languages. Now, with
mhm,
vibe coding, obviously that's become a bit more democratized. So that set has shifted a bit, but the
mhm.
people who remain technically experts are actually making more money because that's going to be hard to commodify of someone who actually understands the discipline, who can actually figure out the context. So what's strange is the skills that are actually, when I think of AI skills, have much less to do with the technology and tool itself and much more around the domain expertise that they're bringing and using the skill to augment themselves with. And when I think on the soft skill side, what we're actually seeing is what people need right now, and this is really difficult news for most middle managers and organizations, is way less technical knowledge and way more human knowledge. And so, like, I meet with leaders who said, I need someone who's got a lot more empathy, who's got a lot more judgment and able to make ethical decisions. I need someone who has got more of that systems thinking governance mindset, where as we get more AI outputs, they know how to respond to that. and how to redistribute that work. And so to me, it's very much a very different profile than someone who has created expertise over time, doing the same thing just at higher levels. And instead, we're actually asking for someone who's like more of a consulting background or
Uh-huh.
even a little bit more of like that engineering systems background of how does this whole thing work together and yet motivate people through really difficult times of change. So I feel for leaders, the job has become much more change management, much more human. And then from a technical perspective, I feel for those people too, because a lot of the world has become quote unquote democratized, but it's filled with AI slop. And so for as much as there's vibe coding, there's a lot of sloppiness that's out there. And so we're at this really weird point of you need both technical and
Mhm.
social skills. And who's got time to do both? Who wants to do both?
Right, right. And I saw a stat, I think it was from Gartner or McKinsey. Those 2 are kind of my go-to. One of them was talking about the amount of extra work that groups are having to do when they put AI in because of the slop,
Mhm.
and I think
Yep.
it's kind of funny to me, we think just throw AI into a platform that is not connected to other data systems, hasn't been cleaned, the data hasn't been cleaned in 10 years, and then we're surprised that it turns into a dumpster fire.
Yep.
Um, what are you talked about kind of the skills of agency and orchestration.
Yeah.
How about Gen Z? Like how
Yeah.
are they interacting with AI and like what's their perception of the skills that are needed in the market?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I've got a wonderful opportunity to interview Gen Z quite a bit just for my research. And I'm finding
Mhm.
this fascinating trend where Glean Institute, Rebecca Hines over there coined these terms. So I want to get her credit for it. It's called bot sitting and bot shit. And I think what they define that as is like bot shit being all the AI slop and that things get shipped that have no
Uh-huh.
human oversight. And then bot sitting of just like managing all these AI tools or agents that also are kind of doing sloppy work and they have to rework.
Mm.
I think Gen Z sees it for what it is. I do not think they are as enamored with AI the way that we are. And I
Mhm.
think that's actually pretty profound. And Gallup released some research recently in Pew that showed Gen Z actually trusts AI the least out of all the generations. And you think about it, they're digitally native, like they're wise. They kind of, in many ways are seeing things for what it is. They're not into like the theatrical performative hype. And so I think it's
Mhm.
going to be really interesting. And when I meet with Gen Zers, they tell me like, how do I learn social skills? How do I learn politics of an organization? These are all things also remote work has not been friendly to this cohort
Right.
about.
Right.
So to like I think they are so hungry for how can I develop these skills that actually allow me to move up, manage an organization, navigate a difficult leader, that sort of thing. And I think with AI, I think there's actually a lot of skepticism, and I think they can see through a lot of the hype.
Well, and from my day job, we do a lot of surveys,
Yeah,
and generationally, it's always interesting. So, how do I put this? A third of them are looking at the market and saying, "Okay, it's changed. I need new skills. I
yeah,
own this. I own my career." And this has changed this year versus last year because last year they were still looking at, the colleges should and universities should be preparing
yeah,
me and or whoever
sure.
my employer is. That's changed in just the span of a year. So I think that's a pretty good indicator. And then I'll back up what you said about the healthy cynicism and
Hmm.
trust, or lack thereof, that they have with AI, and it is counterintuitive with them being so AI native. And I don't know if you saw, but there's a trend of a lot of them getting rid of smartphones and just like going back to flip because they don't want to be tied to their phones. My
Yes,
daughter's one of them because I'll text her and then she'll call me, and I love talking to her, but I'm like, baby, I'm in a meeting. That's why I texted you.
right.
Like, well, I just wanted to talk. I was like, well, then we can talk tonight.
Yeah.
So it's so bizarre.
It is. Well, you almost hope, like, from, like, humanity, like, or, generations, we tend to, like, swing to pendulums, each generation, one side maybe
True.
too far, and I almost, like, am hopeful that Gen Z is going to swing like, we swang so far over here of digitizing almost everything and having
Uh-huh.
more almost, attachment to our digital identities and digital lives in many ways, and so I am hopeful where you look at Netflix as what I point out as a perfect example of a digital company who's now investing in in-person experiences. 'Cause that's
Mhm.
what their business model and research is showing is Gen Z actually wants to get together in person. And so I'm really tracking that to see like, wow, okay, is this going to actually be a trend? And if so, I'm hopeful because I do think we
Yeah.
need more in-person community.
Bring the human back for a change.
That's absolutely.
So if you had to give a practitioner or a CXO that's listening and going,
Yep.
okay, fantastic, great data, great conversation. Now what? What's your
Yep.
advice to them?
Number one, this is not popular advice whatsoever at all, but I need you to slow down. Take a deep breath. I think coming out of the pandemic, we also got addicted to chaotic ways of working.
Yes. Yes.
And that has just continued to put fuel on the fire of AI is not a crisis. AI is an opportunity. And I feel like we are treating this as if it's a crisis moment. We were in a crisis moment, but we are not right now. And so I think one is recognizing that we are in a time of great disruption and transformation, but it is not a crisis. And so we've got to step out of that way of behaving. Second thing is there's a huge gap in what I see in my data of leaders using AI versus the workforce. Leaders are still talking about AI, they are still trying to drive AI adoption, but they themselves are not using the technologies and tools. And so I think
Really?
getting hands-on with this is important. And it's funny, like, again, I talk to these leaders in closed door rooms and they're like, it's not my job as a leader. Like, my job is the strategy. My job is to drive the transformation and manage the board. I don't really have time to work with these AI tools." Like, well, if you don't, your workforce certainly
Yeah,
doesn't.
my brain is short circuiting. Like, how are you going to lead
Yeah,
transformation with a
correct.
tool technology that you're not exposing yourself to?
I mean, I know it's shocking. Well, and here's the other thing that I've heard behind closed doors. I really appreciate this leader who was so, like, gracious and honest. She said to me, "We as a leadership team are actually a little afraid to adopt these tools because if we're mathing and saying we need less project managers or less marketers because of AI, does that mean we're gonna need less leaders because of
Mm,
AI?" And I
mm,
think that is probably a little bit of the hidden fear. No matter who you are in the organization, we probably all share that, even at the
mm.
very top. So I think there's part of that also going on. Not necessarily, that's never going to make a media headline, but certainly behind closed door conversations, leaders are grappling with that same reality.
Very
So
interesting.
yeah, so I think doing those two things is a great place to start. Getting out of chaotic crisis mode and then getting hands on with the technology. I think you'll be able to see much more clearly where you should be going, where you should be chasing the value, not efficiency play. And
Mhm.
I think we could probably actually have a lot more like humanity and fun back at work as well and get out of the craziness that we all seem to be operating in.
Imagine that. Imagine
Right.
that. So, like, if someone's interested in your research or having you come work with their company, how can they find and connect with you?
Yes. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. As you know, Trent, that's how we
Yes,
connected.
I
Come
know.
find me on LinkedIn. But, I've got a company called Beyond the Desk. You can find me at beyondthedesk.com. We're coming in, helping organizations do the hard work, do a lot of process reimagination, do leadership development to really help help leaders get this
Mhm.
moment right. And then the last thing I'll just say is this fall, I've got a new book coming out, Reclaim the Plot: How Leaders Rewrite the Story When AI Rewrites Work. This is I've created a fictional story to help leaders actually understand the moment we're in. It's filled with some great guides, frameworks, so they can go back into their team meetings and really think the way that they're leading through this AI revolution.
I love it. I know we could probably talk for another 45 minutes. It does
Yes.
not feel like it has been that long. But thank you so much. And as new research comes out that you're doing, I expect
Yep.
to be on the top 10 list of
Oh,
people that find out about it, right?
absolutely. You will.
Good. That's
You'll
the
get
right
an early
answer.
preview.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience did too.
Thanks for having me.